Hey guys, welcome back to the second session of Property Talks with Eugen Tan. In today's session, I'll be sharing with you guys the current market situation, which is a continuation of the first session. So before I begin, whatever that I'm going to be sharing with you guys today is based on my own research and analysis. It does not represent others. So please do your own due diligence before making any major decisions. Yeah, and if you like my content so far and you want to keep yourself updated with the property market in Singapore, feel free to follow my Facebook and Instagram handles, right, at Superior Homes for Facebook and Superior Homes SG for Instagram. Right, I'll be posting a lot more content on those platforms, right? So stay tuned. Now, without further ado, let me continue with session 2. Right, in the first session, we actually mentioned quite a lot of things when we talked about the the real estate cycle, how it actually functions. We talked about demand and supply, right? How it actually affects the property market in Singapore. And of course, we understand that the property market, right, has been very, very hot for the longest period of time, right? And prices have been increasing. We also know that in recent times, the transaction volumes have actually slowed down as well. So today, I want to go a little bit more in depth to actually share with you guys, based on my analysis, what was the reason that the property prices actually increased all of a sudden, right? So just a quick recap, we see that resale HDBs have been increasing for 23rd straight months, and for resale condos, it has been increasing for 22nd straight months. Now, when we understand, when we look back, when COVID-19 first started, we understand that the major issue that we had was labor, right? Labor was one of the biggest issues, right? And because of that, it caused a delay in all the BTOs. So those people who are buying BTOs, right, you have different profiles. You have your upgraders, your downgraders, and your first-time buyers, right? So, different buyers come from different profiles and they have different urgency levels, I would say, right? And they have different timelines. So certain buyers need houses, I would say, more urgently than others. So those who can't wait for the BTOs, they have two options. They can either rent or they can actually they can actually buy a resale flat. So when they buy a resale flat, what happens is that you have this sudden surge of demand, right? As you can see from the graph here, from the first session, we see that because of the delay in the BTOs, we see that the transaction volumes actually shot up from 3,426 to the 7,000 plus range. And it was very, very stable throughout the years 2020 to 2021. Right, and of course, in recent times, we see that the property transactions have been slowing down. Now, it's the same thing for your private properties transaction volumes, right? In the resale sector, same thing, right? From 933, it actually shot up to about the 3,000 plus range, and it was pretty healthy. There was a good amount of increment in terms of the transaction volumes, right? From 3,000 to 4,000 plus to 5,000 plus, and of course, in recent times, we see that it's slowly coming down. Right. So if you recall, we mentioned about the real estate cycle and how it functions, right? Because when there are buyers in the market, there will be sellers as well. So when buyers buy over the seller's unit, sellers have to buy as well, right? So different sellers would then have different options. Some would go into private property, some will go back to a HDB. So at any one point of time, many different profiles of buyers with different needs and wants are being created. Right, that's why we see an overall increase in the resale transactions for your private property and your HDB, right? So because of that, right, we see that the property transactions increase, right? And in recent times, it has actually come down. So because of the slowing down of the resale transaction volumes, we see that HDB prices, in terms of their growth, has actually been increasing at a slower pace. Same thing for your private property, right? It has been increasing at a slower pace as well. Okay, so when we talk about demand and supply, right? When demand actually falls and supply rises, our price will fall, right? And when demand rises, right, and supply falls, our price actually rise. So the thing is this, right? When we look at this demand and supply curve, right? Not curve, like a chart, right? When we look at this, which part of the graph do you think that we are actually at, right? I think it's quite obvious that we're actually in this area here, right? That's what we are experiencing today. We see that prices are increasing, right? Even though they are at a slower rate right now. The demand is still there, but even though it's slowly coming down, and we have less supply, right? So I want to show you this graph over here, okay? Because this graph is actually very interesting. It actually shows the perfect correlation between price movements and of course the demand of properties in Singapore, right? So the bars that you see actually, they represent demand, and the yellow part of the curve you see that is actually the price movement. So one thing that we can see is that at every dip in terms of the prices here, right, we can see that when these dips happen, the demand is actually also low. Right, we can see that demand is low, right? Demand low, demand low, demand is low. So when you have low demand, price will actually follow suit, right? The price will actually drop. And when you have an increment, right, like these two areas here, you can see that demand over here is relatively high, right? It's actually very high here, right? You have high demand. So this goes to show, how if we implement demand and supply to the property market in Singapore, we can see that there's a definite correlation, right? That when demand slows down, your price will also slow down. It will actually follow suit, right? And when demand is high, right, your price will actually also follow suit, right? So now when we talk about the demand, right, we also need to talk about supply, right? So what's going to happen in the next few months or years, in fact, right? What's going to be happening into the property market? Now, we know that in the first quarter of 2021, for the resale transaction volumes, we actually did about 3,377, right? So in the next coming few months and years ahead, what can we actually expect, right? In the year 2022, which is this year, right, and 2023, there are actually going to be a lot of projects, right? New launch projects that are actually going to hit their TOP mark. So that means to say that all these owners will be getting their keys, they will become landlords, they will become sellers, and they will become homeowners, right? Now, what do I mean by this is that because different owners, different homeowners, they have different needs, right? Some of them will actually start to market their unit, for rental. That would actually also contribute to the supply of units that are available for rental, right? And some of the owners will actually start to sell their units right upon hitting TOP. So that's where you also see a number of supply coming into the resale market for sale, right? And then of course those who are staying for own stay, they're going there for own stay. So the thing is that there's a number of projects, you see. So we can actually expect a number of supply entering the pipeline in the next few months and years ahead. Right, so the question is, today we see a slowdown in the demand. So what actually will happen when demand slows down but the supply is high? Right, because we see a number of supply coming into the pipeline, right, but demand is actually slowing down. So when we refer back to this demand and supply chart here, we understand that when demand falls and supply rises, our price will fall. Right, so I think we can take this as a precautionary warning, right, to actually understand what's going to be happening in the next few months and years ahead, right? We can actually do some homework for ourselves. Right, now what about the HDB sector, right? HDB sector, of course, HDB launches 6,535 flats in May 2022 BTO and sales of balance flat exercises. So these are the incoming supply for the HDB market, right? These are going to be added into the supply pipeline in the years ahead, right? But what about in recent times, right? So I actually went ahead and found out this, right? I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but let me try to zoom it in. Right, now this is the full list of BTO projects to hit MOP in 2022. So that's this year alone. We can see that it's a super long chart, right? It's a super long chart with all the names of of the developments that are going to be MOPing soon, right? And they're all over Singapore, right? You have Bukit Batok, 𝐼𝐸𝐿, Sembawang, Yishun, Punggol, Jurong West, Woodlands, Sengkang. So there is a lot of supply coming in, and you can see that based on the number of units, they are not small projects, right? They're actually quite a big scale projects with 1,000 over plus units, some over 700, 400. Irregardless, it's a lot of units coming into the pipeline, right? And these are all this year alone. They're going to be MOPing this year. So what is MOP is actually, these homeowners have actually hit the minimum occupation period of 5 years, which would then allow them to actually sell the unit into the resale market, right, if they wish to do so. So this is what's going to be happening in terms of the supply, right, for your HDB market in the coming years ahead. Right, so I want to share with you guys this chart as well. This is actually the private residential price index. Now, what is so interesting about this graph? Okay, if you realize, this is actually a 10-year cycle, right? Each and every one of these years ahead is actually a 10-year cycle apart, right? So this is where we are today now. Now, one thing to actually take note is that if we realize from this graph, what can we translate the data to? We realize that each peak is actually higher than the previous one, right? It's getting higher and higher. The peak is getting higher and higher, right? So that is quite obvious that we can see that the direction is actually heading towards an upward trend, right? But one thing to also actually take note, right? In the early 1980s to the 1990s, we see a sudden, surge in terms of the prices, right? And then afterwards, it actually came down, and this was quite a drastic drop. Yeah, it was quite a drastic drop, and after which we see another increase in the market. We see a rebound in the market, and then another drop, right? And in the early in the 2010s area, we see that there's a drop also, right? And then now that's where we are over here, right? Now, one thing that we can actually take note, okay, even though each peak is getting higher than the previous one, right? We actually see that the dip in the prices, right? The slope is getting less steep as before. That means to say, whenever there is a price correction, or if let's say there's a new cooling measure being implemented, or a market slowdown, be it let's say a financial crisis or a health crisis, right? The property prices are becoming more stable, right? As we can see, right? It's becoming more stable. Right, so I think many of us will be thinking to ourselves, what actually happened that made the property market in Singapore so stable that it is today, right? So I actually be covering this in my next session, right? Because there's actually a lot of contributing factors, right? So do stay tuned for that. Right, so the thing is that, right, in conclusion, we understand that, the recent transaction volumes have been slowing down. As a result, it caused the price growth to actually slow down as well, right? But nevertheless, we're actually still at the peak over here. Now, the question is, what are our options then, right? So the thing is this, right? When we talk about what are our options, of course, for upgraders and downgraders, if you guys will want to take the advantage of the opportunity today to actually cash out at the highest price possible because we are at the peak, then of course I think that is a good decision to make, right? But of course, you have to actually do your risk analysis reports. You actually have to do your financial calculations as well, right? So usually how I actually advise my clients is I actually do a risk analysis report for them to actually calculate their risk in terms of the decision that they're making, right? Be it upgrading or downgrading. Other than that, of course, you have to calculate your financial numbers as well, right? Because of course, with every move you make, there is risk involved, right? So the idea behind it is to make sure that you have sufficient reserve funds, so that you are at the best possible position at the lowest risk. As for investors, of course, we see that the market is actually heading towards an upward trend, right? For new launches, of course, we do see that the PSFs are actually increasing, right, with each passing project, right? With each project, we see that prices are actually going higher and higher. So of course, if you like to ride the wave, and of course invest in today's market, I will think that of course, there are possibilities to do so as well. But of course, it really depends on your investment portfolio, right? It may or may not be suitable for you as well. So it really depends, For investment side, I'll actually be covering a lot more in the upcoming contents because there's a whole separate different checklist for investors, which I'll be talking more in the next few sessions, right? So thank you so much for joining me in this session 2, right? Right, my name is Eugen Tan, right? So if you guys like my content so far, you like my videos, you like what I share, please hit the like and subscribe button, right, to stay tuned for my upcoming more sessions, right? Thank you so much for joining me, right? Have a great day. Thank you.